And welcome everyone. This time I'm going to show you how I work with Blender. Stardeus is a 2D game, but I make all the assets in 3D with Blender and then export them as PNG sprites with transparency. Alright, so let's begin. Now, whenever I open the file, the first thing I do, I have to go to scripting, and there's this script here, which fires up everything that I have automated for the Blender. So I have to press play, and then the script executes. Now I can go to layout and say hit space to open up the menu and type activate and then a device name or any object name. So let's say I want to look at a matter reactor and I type matter and hit enter and there we go. We have the matter reactor loaded. The camera proportions have changed. They were square, now they're 2x3. If I choose a different device, let's say activate crafting station. We can see that this is back to square. And this is how the crafting station looks with all these little details and stuff. If I press 0 on numpad, it shows me this preview. I also have this little window here where I usually make it render the preview with the lights so I can see how it will look in the final view. And then I hit F12 and this shows the render so I can examine the result. Sometimes I like to do things like alpha to see if the shadows are in place because shadows should never go outside. If you do the shadows incorrectly, it could leak and then look bad in the game. So this could be used to debug that in the render. On the right side, nothing is special. We have our collections here. Each object is in its own collection and it resembles the structure from this Python file called sprite defs. So the sprite defs file tells what things in the Blender are. So if I want to work on a fusion drive, I say that I have a fusion drive sprite and it has to be 3x3. And then there's extra bits and pieces here like skip rotations. For example, if system scanner looks the same from left and right and up and down, I could skip these rotations and just have 2 sprites instead of 4 because 2 of them would be identical. There's also some other things here, like some things are not rotatable, some things use flat camera, like a thread mill. So you can try activate thread mill. So this time the camera is slightly different proportions. So when I render it, I get something like that. So it doesn't have height. It takes the picture a bit differently. So now if we zoom out, we could see that there are a bunch of lights here. These should not be touched. These are set up in a way that whatever I render, it all looks consistent with the rest of the art. Generally, you shouldn't add any new light sources, except for maybe if you want something to emit light. Yeah, sometimes you may want to have a little light source somewhere on the object just to shine a little bit of colorful light on the object itself. But normally everything would look lit just like everything else in the game. Another notable thing is the freestyle outline. In the render properties, freestyle is enabled and nothing should be touched here. It's automatically being configured by the Python scripts and it creates the outline which looks consistent for every single object. There are some tricks with the outline, like for example, if you don't want some of the parts to have an outline, you can select that and do something called mark freestyle face. So for example, if we want the screen to have no outline, we could select the screen, edit, select all the faces and do mark freestyle face. And now if I render, there will be no outline here, but there will be an outline on all the other parts. So this is how you can control certain parts where you don't want the outline. Let's undo that. Select all, clear, freestyle face. Render again, the outline should be back. The next thing I want to talk about is camera setup. When you create a new entry in the sprite defs Python file, it sometimes tells what the camera should be. There are some options here for the camera. Also, depending on this width and height, the rotation values, the camera could be different for up and right rotations. For example, for communicator, if we render it from the front, it will be 2x2, but when we render it from the side, it would be 1x3. So it would be 1 height, 3 width, and here it will be 2 width, 2 height. That also is controlled automatically. You don't have to mess with cameras, you don't have to touch them. They're set up here, and the right camera, as you can see, there's a bunch of cameras, and the right camera is activated when needed, whenever you choose a different object through the script. So if you can do activate recycler, you can see that camera has swapped into 3x4. And it also adjusts, not just that, it also adjusts the rendering settings. So you shouldn't touch cameras ever if you're working with the Blender file that is supplied by the game. Talking about that, you can find the Blender file in this GitHub repository, Stardeus mod template. In the artwork folder, we have the Blender file, Stardeus mod blend, and there's scripts that will help you run this whole thing. So there's sprite devs that I was showing and so on. It's a little bit reduced. You'll have all the cameras, you'll have a bunch of materials, you'll have some examples, but this is not up to date. As you can see, it's 2 years old. Maybe I will update this eventually. Next, we have the shadows. Without them, the objects would look very flat. So you can see here, we have this nice little shadow in the darker areas of the object. It looks as if it's a little bit hovering. We could fix that by lifting this up a little bit and re-rendering. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. See, so now we have brought the shadow a little bit closer to the edge. Now, I think I chose a very complicated object. I activated table steel, and now we can see how the shadow works on this one. We can switch to alpha, and there's, as you can see here, there's a small issue. The alpha channel is leaking down there. It's not going to be very noticeable, but we could fix that, I guess. To fix that, this shadow catcher likely needs to be a little bit smaller. So let's select these points, bring them up, try to render now. There we have it. So now the shadow will not go outside. A little bit about this shadow catcher object. Let me recreate this for the table. I'm going to delete that. Generally, I do this. I add a cube, scale it down, bring it lower, scale it on the y-axis, scale it on the z, bring it close to the object. I'm just going to make it very quick and inaccurate, just for the sake of the demonstration. Now, if we would render, we would get this white stuff. The shadow is there, but it's looking bad. It also has outlines. First, let's remove the outlines again. We select everything and do mark freestyle face. So freestyle faces will be ignored by the outline, and now you can see the outline is not there anymore. But we don't want to render the object, so we want to go into the object properties here. We're going to select this object visibility, mask as shadow catcher. Now, once we do that, if we render, we only see the shadow. But the shadow is now very sharp, and that doesn't look good. So that's why I usually do this. Since I scaled the object, I'm gonna select it, hit Ctrl A, and then apply scale. That will allow me to apply even bevel. So then I go to modifiers and add a bevel modifier. And then I will adjust it a little bit to add a bit more segments, so it would be more rounded. And then we also want to click Shade Smooth. Now when we render, shadow is no longer sharp. One more thing, the shadow catcher also needs a material. Let's add this, select and type shadow catcher. There's a few of them, but the first shadow catcher will be the one we want. See, now this became darker. The shadows are darker underneath the table. So those are also looking a bit more cartoony because I'm using Toon BSDF here. So sometimes you might want to play around with this, but if you want the shadows to look almost exactly as all the objects have in the game, you could use the shadow catcher object, or some variations that you can find when you search. The Blender file that is provided will have these. So there you go. This is shadows. Next, we want to talk about modeling itself. If we want to add a new device, for example, let's call that new device Magic Cube. I'm gonna copy a fridge, call this Magic Cube. Objects, devices, Magic Cube. And I want to see like how big it will be. So let's make it 2 by 2, but it's going to be slightly lifted from the ground, which means that we want to also add height to it. The height can only go by +1. So basically we have to do 2 by 2 plus 1. So we could actually write 2 by 2 plus 1, it would work, but I write 2 by 3. And when we rotate it, it will still look 2 by 3. So we're going to just keep it like that. So now when we have this Magic Cube, we have to create the path objects/devices/Magic Cube, and we have to create a collection with the same name. First of all, since we have modified the sprite devs py, we need to go into scripting again. No, actually, if we would go to scripting and press run, that wouldn't work. Since we modified the sprite devs, we have to hit space and do reload scripts. But we shouldn't select the first one, Blender system. We should select Blender render Stardeus reload scripts. This is important. Once we reload those scripts, we can now do activate magic cube. And it's going to be here, but it's only here. If we try to activate it, it will fail. And it also showed an error from the last thing when I created the shadow catcher. I forgot to put it inside the collection. So let's fix that. Let's activate steel table. And now we have to drag this all the way over here. And now it's part of this table steel 1x2 collection. So now if we again activate magic cube, nothing is visible. But this is because we failed to, if we press 0, you can see the camera is 2x3, but we failed to find the right collection that we need to open. So we're gonna have to go to devices, create new, go to all the way down here, and we're gonna F2 to rename. Magic cube. Now since we have that, let's just deactivate it and see if it actually works. If we do activate magic cube, it is activating. We can see that this was enabled. And now we can just do whatever we want, like add a cube. Since it's a magic cube, we're going to rotate on Z by 45. We're going to rotate on X by 45. We're gonna rotate on Z by 45 one more time. Maybe not. How about we go from top and do something like this. Here we can see a preview. So let's say this is our magic cube. Doesn't really like this rotation. Let me do something like that. Maybe rotate sideways a little bit more. There we go. So this is my magic cube. I don't know why I would have that in the game, but let's say we add some texture on it. For texturing, you can choose a bunch of materials that are predefined. Like for example, one material I like to use is black hole Fresnel. That looks very interesting, especially with geometry that would be slightly rounded. So if we add a bevel on this magic cube and do something like that. And then we do shade auto smooth. You can see that it's looking pretty sweet. And there's this little rim light here. Okay, so then another trick I like to do is to add little ridges with lights. So let's say we apply this modifier, and now we take this thing, do some loop cuts. I'm gonna do Alt and select this whole thing. So if I inset, can inset twice and make a little row like that, then I could do Alt E, extrude along normals, and then I could make this like go inside a little bit. That's something I do often in the game. And then when I have that, I want to go to materials, add plus, assign the material, and select blue light. It's not actually that blue because it's pretty emissive, but when we render it, it looks very nice. It drops this little blue blue tint on the object. So yeah, that's quite Stardeus looking right now. Yeah, so then we would add a shadow catcher in the bottom Let's add that real quick. Cube. Oh, wait. Should have exited the object mode. Cube. Move it down. Select it all. Mark freestyle face to get rid of the outlines. If we just render that, again, we need to go to object properties and make this a shadow catcher. If we just render that, it looks like this. We always need to check alpha so it wouldn't go out of bounds, and you can see it goes out of bounds pretty much. I actually think that a sphere would look nice here, but we could just do a bevel and bevel it hard this time, so we could turn it into a sphere almost on its own. So sheet smooth, render, and let's take a look at that. Almost there. The only change now is to set the shadow catcher material, which would drop a harder shadow, cartoony shadow here. So there we go. We have a weird looking, oh, what is that? That doesn't look good. Maybe that's just like, oh, that's probably a reflection. Yeah, that's the light eating into the shadow a little bit. So that's looking okay. So we can imagine that this is some cube that is hovering with some gravity stuff. Yeah, and then when we want to export, of course, this cube does not justify the 2x3 size. So if we go here, press 0, what I usually do is this. I want to make it as big as it can be, and maybe lift it up a bit because it's hovering above the ground. And then we could also add some... Why is the 3D cursor in a weird place? We could add some pylon here, like a cylinder that holds this cube upright. And then auto smooth, and maybe select a different material for this. We could do something like blue light desaturated, which is one of the core metal materials in the game that I use. And actually shade smooth sometimes doesn't look good because it adds these little things, but that also depends on the material. So if we switch this to a different material, it might look better. Let's try something like Terraformer Atmo, which will be more sharp. And now you can see this has a much smoother transition because it's not toony, it's principled BSDF. At some point I switched away from toon shaders and started using principled BSDF more. That produces less flat look, and it has more subtlety to it, and it can do a bunch of stuff. That doesn't look good, right? It needs to be maybe some thin things, something thin stuff with maybe a mirror modifier in there on X and Y, and then we will go to edit mode and move this like that, so we would get more pylons, and then we could maybe rotate these like so. Stretch on local axis, local, individual origins S. Wait. Okay, it's not stretching as I expected, but that's whatever. Doesn't matter. So yeah, now it seems that this cube is sitting here on these legs. I think these legs would look better if they were metal, so we could try brushed metal X. If the brushing is in the wrong direction, which it is, we could switch to metal Y or metal Z. I believe Z is the best here, because then we'll see the brushing. Although in the render it might not very much be visible, but it still feels better to make it right. Yeah, so we have these metal legs here. Now this looks like a cannon of some sort, so we could go select this face, maybe subdivide a bunch of times, and maybe do inset individual extrude along normals inwards and add those little blue lights there. And there we go, we have something like that. Now, if the lights are too deep, let's undo. That's too much. Extrude along normals just a little bit. Here we could see how it would look, so we can still see the faces. If we assign these, render, now we can see these little light dots. So there you go, that's the Stardeus object. Now to export this, you would go and hit space and do export magic cube. And that will create 4 files in 4 different rotations in the right folder. In the right folder, which will be, for the purposes of my own development, I made it go into my folders mods core graphics, and then from there we can go to objects, devices, and we'll find the magic cube that we just made. And there's a problem here. It seems to be not rotated. It seems that all the orientations are the same. And do you know why? This is because we forgot to move these new things. This is a common thing for me as well. I do it all the time. I forgot to move these into the Magic Cube collection because the rotation automatically happens only for things that are inside the collection, inside the right collection. So now we're gonna re-export, again, hit space, export Magic Cube, and the next re-export should fix this. We can see, if we watch this, we'll see these change into the right. Oh no, it didn't. So what broke this time? What broke this time? The answer is I have switched this to local. It needs to be global. It's a bit weird because it should have done this automatically, but maybe just something was wrong. Global 3D cursor. This should be automatic. Third attempt. Export Magic Cube. You see here, these are a little broken. And there we go. Yeah. It was likely the local coordinate system. So my automation is not really perfect. Sometimes it goes and produces some weird stuff, but if you fiddle around with it, it will eventually work. Yeah, so there we go. We have the magic cube, which is not really a magic cube, but it is rotated in 4 directions. And this, oh, okay, so these should be fixed. In this orientation, we can see that there is some gap between the supporting legs. But that's not the point. I just wanted to show you the pipeline and how I work. And now I could use this thing, I could just bring this thing into the game. So let's actually do that. I'll run Unity. And I'll show you how easy it is to bring this into the game. So I'll go into the code and go, let's find a similar device, something like recycler. Objects, devices, recycler definition. So I'm just going to copy the recycler and name this magic cube. Now, let's say it will be the same as recycler, so it will require recycling research, and width is 2 by 2. Work spot, yeah, let's have a work spot here at 1 minus 1, so it would be 1 to the right and 1 down. It will require electricity, it will be damageable, have the wear, and we could add visual effects, but I'm going to remove that for now. And we will not produce heat, and it will be flammable. Aesthetics will be pretty, of course. It's a huge, nice magic cube. It's going to be +10 aesthetics. There will be no extra info, no processing, no behaviors related to Recycler. It could have a light source. We could change the color here. And we could also make it pulsate, and we could change the radius. So let's make a small radius and something red. So let's make it almost pure red. So something like 225, 32, 32. It's going to be very red. And this is the most important part. Tile graphics. We're going to just say objects, devices, magic cube that we just created has height true. If we would set this to false or leave it out, it should have 2 by 2 in the sprite devs. But since it is 2 by 3, then we have to do has height true, while tile transform is 2 by 2. So this might be confusing at first, but it's actually pretty simple. That +1 is just the height. Okay, passability, that's good. Constructible, let's say we'll keep the same as for recycler, and we're ready. That's it. We can just play. And the game is going to rebuild all the sprites now. It will detect that there's new graphics, and it will build the graphics cache. So that takes a little while whenever you change the sprites. But after rebuild, this whole thing will be packed inside the atlas. So you can actually check if it packed correctly or what it packed. So you could go into this folder here, which will be your username, app data, local, code linea, Stardeus, and you'll see the cache folder. Since I'm running in the editor, I have the cache editor, so I have to open this. These are the custom graphics that you could add, but it will likely be in the default PNG file. So you can open these and hit left, and you can see this new art thing is packaged with the sprites. So it's here. Nothing is missing. If you use mods, or if you make mods, the mods graphics will also be in these atlases here. So the game loads those, and then the game knows what to show in what spot. So now let's load some game. Let's load a save, and we're going to try to find this new device that we have just added. Since I copied recycler, it's going to be here. There we go. I can put 1, 2 rotations, 3 rotations, 4 rotations, and as you can see, it emits red light, just as we configured. And that's how we add art into the game. And it doesn't look really too much different from the rest. So because it has the outlines, it uses the same little lights like most other things do. And yeah, that's how we do it. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you have fun making art. See you in the next video. Thank you for watching.